Did we not get?
Oh, it's okay. I can
Oh,
take
this is the
end.
letter. You may want to bring it to Josh Morris.
Probably September, okay? Have you got that? Have you?
Yeah, my family got it on Christmas Eve, actually.
Yeah. So my son got it
One
Christmas
thing I
Eve,
miss
too.
about
Well, he
being
had
at
a
home
test. He
is
didn't
my
have any.
gigantic screen
And the second test
where
he
I
was
can see
fine.
all the plans really well.
I got,
Hey, Jim, how are
but I
you?
had a real, just a bad feeling, and it's right now for you, so.
Everything's going?
So, how was your time?
It was great. I last was participating from Kona,
So they.
the Big Island.
Can't be vaccinated.
That's
Yeah, yeah.
Pay for effort, and my
good.
wife still talked to me afterwards too.
It was probably still
She was doing some
managed to go there, too.
It was all good.
That's good.
Yep.
This is important, though. This is going to
James,
transform one
how
end
are ya?
of downtown.
Bill?
I live right around the corner, so I am very aware of it.
Overall, right, yeah.
I do too.
Which island did you go to?
Oh, we went to Oahu, then we went to the Big Island, and then we were in Maui.
So how long were you there? A couple of weeks?
We were on 2 weeks.
Good for you.
2 weeks start to finish.
Yeah,
It's
so I
good.
got a wedding that I'm going for my cousin's son, and he's in the Air Force, and he met his wife to be. She was a nurse, and Oahu. It was one of the big islands.
Right.
Yeah.
We did do Kauai last time.
I think that overlay is really important.
Loved it.
And the one on High Street, too. I mean,
I didn't think we'd ever get back, and then the
those
wedding.
two are going to really shape what
going
this
in
town
July,
looks like in 20 years.
It's a long flight.
We flew Hawaiian Airlines, so it was nonstop to Oahu,
Yeah.
which was great. So we kind of did an open.
Boston?
Yes, it was like 10
Imagine
and a
if
half hours.
somebody
So it
built a
was pretty good.
storage facility in one of those places.
Good.
Yeah,
It's good.
yeah. There's a market for it.
Have a wedding. It was our wedding. Our wedding anniversary earlier in May, and birthday at the end of the month. So it was good. Good trip.
Given that that's dropped down from 210, I feel like that's reasonable.
Yeah, I came in just after that.
Well, for the town,
Oh, so I had to bring my power with me here.
I literally think that's too hard. It's going to be way more than that, but
Yeah.
I printed out some paper copies of a few things.
it'll be good for next week. Should we do it? What could you shake Tony down for like 50?
Yeah.
Just shake Tony down for 50. Try. No. Just,
Yeah. There's a lot of aspects to this stuff.
just going to Tony.
A little less of a crowd than last time.
The resident who wrote who I think wrote the letter, delivered a paper copy of it to Josh. Chan.
Oh, do you have it? All right, we're on now. Good evening. If we could start the meeting, Jim Sears, Chairman of the Danvers Planning Board. Welcome to our meeting of June 14th, 2022. At this time, before we begin, I would just ask for a brief silent moment of silence for Wayne Markey, a remarkable man who ran this town for, I believe it's over 35 years as town manager. Thank you. So continue our meeting this evening on Maple Square project. We are also having a Zoom meeting as we've done in the past. So we do have a few people, I think, who have joined on Zoom. And if folks watching want to contact us, they can do it through the Zoom with the chat, or I believe that's probably the best way, with comments or questions. So starting again on the Maple Square project, this is a request for special permit and site plan review submitted by AAM 15 Management LLC for properties at 114 Maple Street, map 43 lot 510, 128 Maple Street, map 43 lot 512, 140 Maple Street, map 43 lot 530, 146 Maple Street, map 43 lot 531, 146A Maple Street, map 43 lot 532, 148 Maple Street, map 43 lot 533, 1 Hobart Street, map 43 lot 509, 3 Hobart Street, map 43 lot 508, 6 Hobart Street, map 43 lot 405, 7 Hobart Street, map 43 lot 507, 9 Hobart Street, map 43 lot 506, 53 North Putnam Street, map 43 lot 518, 61 North Putnam Street, map 43 lot 516, 66 North Putnam Street, map 43 lot 529, 2 Putnam Court, map 43 lot 515, and 6 Putnam Court, map 43 lot 514. Pursuant to section 18.4.B.2, maximum number of dwelling units per building, section 18.4C, density bonus requirements, section 18.5D4, parking requirements table, section 18.5D6D, street side parking, section 18.13, design special permits, section 22 and section 4 of the zoning bylaw. Said properties are in the Maple Street Traditional Neighborhood Development Smart Growth Overlay District. The applicant is proposing a mixed-use redevelopment to include 147 residential units with associated site modifications. Nancy?
Thank you very much. My name is Nancy McCann. I'm here on behalf of the applicant, AAM 15 Management LLC, with regard to the Maple Square mixed-use development. With me tonight from AAM 15 is David Massey, Nick Fay, and Tony Libro. Also with me tonight is Jeremy Lee, the primary owner of most of the properties that we're talking about tonight. And as you recall, this is a compilation of 16 parcels that are incorporated into the overlay district, the 40-hour overlay district that was enacted by the town a number of years ago. We made our submission back in April 19th, and at the May 24th Planning Board meeting, we made a very detailed presentation, and I want to thank the board for giving us the time that evening to make a full presentation. And we left that meeting with some questions, a list of questions and comments that we were asked to address. Since that time, we've been quite busy, and we have made a submission on June 7th to the board of a full responsive package that responded to all of the questions and the comments that we heard, and included some revisions to the plans in response to those comments. We've made some refinements to the architectural design, and hopefully you had a chance to take a look at the new renderings. Significant refinement of the exterior in response to the comments that we had. This is one of the most important parts of the public hearing process is to hear the comments and then be able to incorporate them into the project, and you can see the result of that there. The development team, Nick Fay and Tony Libro, also met with Representative Sally Kearns and several constituents and town meeting members since the last meeting to answer questions and address those comments. And we certainly had several meetings with town staff and town departments since the last meeting. Tonight, what I'd like to do is not represent the application, because we certainly did that in detail at the last meeting. What I'd like to do is present to you the revisions that we've made and the response to the various questions. And then I'd like Joe Titone, our project architect, to review the architectural changes and review some of the questions that we had leaving the last meeting, and then we can review the special permits and waivers if you wish, Mr. Chairman, and then we'll be available to answer any questions or comments that you may have. We do have our full development team with us tonight, so that we're prepared to answer any questions that might come up. June 7th, the responsive letter that was submitted with a full plan set went in with that, and we responded to comments, first of all to comments as well as to questions. So I'd like to take a minute to just go through the questions and the answers that we provided. And the first question was, are there similar building design examples within the North Shore? And Joe Titone is going to present those to you tonight and discuss the changes to the renderings based on the comments that we heard. Is it possible to add landscaping along the southerly side of the restaurant? We've looked into that, and yes, we have added landscaping along the southerly side of the restaurant. We have planters added to the plan, even though, as we discussed at the last meeting, it's a little tight given the entrance there and the utility requirements and transformer requirements. We were able to add some planters there. Do we have enough snow storage? The project engineer has calculated once again and confirmed and added notes to the plan relative to adequacy of snow storage. With regard to the proposed lighting, we did get comments at the last meeting with regard to the lighting that we had proposed, and the lighting fixtures we thought, number one, and importantly, met the lighting standard requirements under the bylaw for dark sky compliance, but also would disappear into the project rather than be a focal point. However, we did provide an alternative lighting cut sheet for you to review for certain sections of the project, specifically along Maple and Hobart Street. We have also been in communication with the town electric department to coordinate the fixture along the streets that could carry through to other areas of the downtown. So we did provide you with an alternative cut sheet for street lighting. Irrigation for the landscaping. The developer is aware that we cannot use municipal water for our landscaping. So irrigation will be handled either through a well, there may be an existing well on the site, or a new well if necessary, but town water will not be used for irrigation. How can potential parking on the church property that is adjacent to the freight house be addressed and prohibited? And the developer is going to provide appropriate parking signage for the Maple Street Congregational Church to address concerns regarding potential use by the public of the church parking lot for access to the rail trail or access to the freight house. There is, of course, a large municipal parking lot immediately adjacent to the freight house park that also provides convenient parking, and appropriate signage will be placed to direct folks to the appropriate parking areas. Are there historic features in the former chapel building that can be retained? I spoke with Jeremy Lee, and he has confirmed that there are no historic features remaining inside the former chapel building, and this was a matter of discussion with the Preservation Commission back prior to the commencement of the permitting process. Department comments, fire department had no comments. The electric department had no comments, but we will continue, obviously, coordination with the electric department. The engineering department did provide you with comments, and we have reviewed, our project engineer and our entire team has reviewed the engineering department comments, and we are able to address and will address each one of those comments appropriately as the development stages continue. We will accept a condition of approval incorporating in its entirety the engineering department's comments as conditions of approval. So those were the questions that we were left with. And then in regard to questions that we heard during the hearing as well as comments that we heard, we've made the following changes to the site plan, and these were indicated on the plan set that was submitted on June 7th. We have added wayfinding signage to the loading area. We've added planters at the south end of the restaurant portion of the mixed-use building. The outdoor dining area has been extended a little bit further along Hobart Street by about 8 feet. Additional benches have been added on Hobart Street. Additional screening and buffering and planting has been provided. We have provided details of tables and chairs proposed. We've provided details of screening of the amenity and private patio areas. We also have with us tonight, and when Joe speaks, he can provide these. We've actually provided some samples for you tonight of the different materials with colors, and so you can actually touch and feel the materials proposed. We've provided the alternative lighting cut sheets for the street fixtures. And the most significant change that we've made was in response to a comment heard from Ms. King with regard to the curb cut on Maple Street to access the parking lot that's located west of the mixed-use building. And what we've done in order to prevent headlights shining into the residential buildings on the other side of Maple Street as one is exiting the parking lot onto Maple Street, we've made that Maple Street access point right in, right out only. And by doing that, vehicles exiting onto Maple Street from the satellite parking lot, I'll call it, they will be turned, and the curb cut will be designed and has been designed on the plan in such a way that the vehicle will be turned so the headlights will no longer shine into that residential, or potentially shine into that residential building. So we've made those changes to the site plan. A couple of minor changes. It made very minor changes in the square footage of the commercial spaces. Those minor tweaking of square footages on the floor plans do not impact the parking requirements because they were so minor. We did change one of the two-bedroom residential units into a 3-bedroom residential unit. So we're proposing 5 3-bedroom units in total for the site. And with that, I think what I would like to do is turn it over to Joe, because the other comments that we had, and as outlined on the June 7th response letter, are architectural in nature, and he is far better speaking to that than I am.
So these are, well, thank you again for hearing us tonight, members of the board. My name is Joe Titone. I'm the project architect out of North Reading, Mass. I've got some precedent images of some other buildings on the North Shore. The two that are on the left side are of 26 Derby Street in Salem. And these, thank you, Scott. As you can see, that building has the curved corner piece. Again, it is a very prominent corner in the town with a lot of visibility from some of the park areas, some of the parking lot areas, the main street through town. And similar to our building, it has a differentiated material for that curved section that is somewhat separated from the adjacent materials. It's got a taller and heavier cornice line, as we've developed ours into as well. And then in general, all of these buildings are 4-story, as ours is. They're broken up into a base, middle, and top section. They're broken up with repetitive bays laterally as they travel down the street. And they have varied materials to accentuate the differentiation of, breaking that up, making the building look more consistent. So the next one at the top is 375 Rantoul Street in Beverly. Again, there's different material and window layouts at the corner. That building and the one below it, which is also on Rantoul Street, are both sited in a linear fashion on the street. They're not on any prominent corners, so they all have square corners to the building, but they are accentuated, as we're doing as well, with different materials, different window layouts. The 375 Rantoul, the top image has awnings along the first floor facade. Some of the issues that I see with that building, the scale of the materials on the first floor are more of it's a siding material. It's a wood or a synthetic siding of some sort. And it doesn't read as commercial or permanent as what we're proposing. It is more of a residential scale in a more of an urban scale building. And then that building also does not have any commercial space except for, I think it's a bakery at the far end of the building, at the building entry. There's also no major building entry signaling on any of these buildings that indicate clearly where, the main entrance to the building is. There's no prominence to the entrances, except for the 26 Derby Street building. The next one down again is on Rantoul Street. Again, similarly broken up. This one has an arcade along the bottom, as you can see, and then it has the blue kind of an overhanging roof that simulates the awnings, but what they're trying to do in that case, that arcade that's there, the open columns and the openness to inside, that's all open into a parking lot, and again, not pedestrian friendly. It's, basically a barrier all the way along the first floor until you get to the building entry at the far end, and you can see the garage entry door on the side elevation there. The bottom one is an apartment building in Wakefield on Audubon Road. This is a somewhat different setting, more contemporary building. Again, similar in that it is 4 stories, it's residential, it's broken up into the bays, but being a more contemporary feel to it. It's got different elements. It's a little bit busier in some ways because of the banding, the vertical window bays in some of the sections, but then simpler in other ways because it doesn't have a lot of detail on the cornice line of the building. It's also, that's the main entry to the site, and there's nothing prominent about it. You can't even tell where the entry to the building is going to be, which it is further down inside the project, but there's nothing that really stands out about the building as you enter the site. So those were the precedents that I had looked at to present similar projects that are in the North Shore.
Okay.
This next slide is just a section of our building at Maple Street and the adjacent Atlantic Ambulance building. As discussed before, our building is 49 feet from average grade to the top of the roof surface. It is a flat roof. We have, I've got kind of in the middle of the top of the roof just an indication of HVAC units and screening. I wanted to make clear that all the HVAC units are towards the middle of the building or centered on the middle of the building, so they won't be visible. You'd have to be very far away for the angle for anyone to be able to see them from a street line. We are anticipating screening the units anyway, both for visual and sound for any adjacent buildings, which I'll address the acoustic issues later on in the presentation. So we're anticipating the screening to be approximately 5 feet tall. It is going to have a number of residential HVAC units, probably one per unit, and then there's going to be some HVAC units for the commercial spaces as well. But again, everything clustered towards the center of the roof. And then we obviously have elevator penthouses, because we have the 4 elevators. Those are going to be about 6 feet above the roof surface. The cornice line, again, is anywhere from 2 to about 4.5 feet, depending on which part of the building. So again, those are going to be substantially covered, unless you're in an adjacent tall building or very far away, at which point they really wouldn't be discernible. So the adjacent Atlantic Ambulance building, the main eave line, the lowest part of the roof edge is about 41 feet off of the street level. The shorter gable that faces the Maple Square project, that faces Maple Street, is about 54 feet high. The main ridge line of the building is about 61 feet high, and the top of the tower is approximately 71 feet tall. So all of these, most of the elements are taller than our building. And these are very tall story heights. There's 3 stories up to that main eave line. So their 3 stories in that building is almost as tall as the 4 stories in the Maple Square project, up to the eave line. And I'd like to address some of the materials now. So I'll start from the bottom. This is the material that we're looking at for the, and I can show the crowd as well. It's a synthetic stone material for the base course of the building, the first floor. It's all the way around the building. The brand is called Ariscraft. So it is a thin veneer product. It's the thickness that you see. It's 3/4 of an inch. And we are proposing 3 colors. This lighter color at the bottom for the body of the building. This slightly darker color here would be the window sills, lintels, and surrounds at the first floor. And then where we have some recessed areas on Maple Street at the residential, where some of the living spaces are recessed back a little bit to give them a little bit more privacy, we're looking at an accent color, probably this one, because that will tie in with the brick that's up above it. So again,
Are they going to be mixed,
main
like you
first
show
floor.
on the depiction there?
Yeah.
Similar to that mix, every other, different colors mixed in? Like on your
Jared, can you bring up
illustration over here.
the next? Okay. So the main, so in the recess, so the main body color would be that lighter color. And then the window surrounds that are masonry. It's hard to discern because the differentiation is fairly light, but around the windows would be that slightly darker but similar hue. And the reddish color would be in these recessed areas. These are the living spaces. So along Maple Street, there's 1, 2, 3, I think 4 on that side, and 2 on North Boulevard. North, excuse me.
It's pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's substantial material.
Yeah.
Next is the brick for the again, typical red brick, again, a thin veneer product. And again, that's used as accents, as you've seen in the last presentation, in the vertical portions of the base. And the question was brought up about the siding material for the rest of the building. This is going to be in two different exposures, 2 different sizes. This is a composite material. It's not vinyl siding. The material, as you can see from the side profile, we'll pass this out to you, is it's a composite material. It's kind of a blend of different plastics, and it's does not absorb water. It's highly impact resistant. It's got a lifetime warranty. Wind tested, hail tested. Not painted. Doesn't need to be painted. It can be pressure washed. It's basically maintenance free.
Chair, I had a question just about the materials.
Sure.
Yeah, just a question about the materials.
Yes.
Just a question about the materials. These materials have all, good track record in terms of being used in buildings in this part of the country, this climate?
Yes.
Oh, but that's just to show the material.
Yes?
Yeah. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
These are the kind of the two colors that we were looking at for the siding, the darker, the lighter.
See that? Ready to redo your house in that color?
That's actually pretty close to that color.
The trim material for the upper part of the building, corner boards, window trim, and so forth, are going to be a cellular PVC. AZAC is one brand. I'm sure most everyone has seen this at this point. As well. Again, maintenance free, does not absorb water, doesn't rot.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
The last thing is the metal panel, which is along the curved portions.
I appreciate it.
And I've got a sample here, but it's not the color that we're gonna be using.
PVC.
So
It's
this
like PVC.
the curved panels are a composite, it's an aluminum skin composite that is very durable. It's a fairly thick aluminum, as you'll see, and they are able to also make the bathrooms and do all the detailing. We're talking to the manufacturer about that. So I've only got small samples, unfortunately, but pass that forward. I've also got a brochure from the company as well with it, if you wanted to walk us through that. It's pretty straightforward. And that's pretty much it for the materials. If there's any questions on that.
Any questions from the board on the materials at this juncture?
Can you just comment how long, you said it has a lifetime warranty, but how long is the useful life of all this material?
I have not seen anything. I've used the Ariscraft, I think the first architectural job I was hired into in the early 80s. We were using Ariscraft back then. It was used a lot. We were doing a lot of bank buildings using it. Back when Bank of America was Baybank, a long time ago.
Remember that? Yeah.
So, the Everlast siding, I think that's been out 6 or 7 years at this point. I'd have to double check that exactly. So I don't, it obviously does not have as long a track record, but from what I've seen, it seems to be proving exceptionally durable, and I'm not hearing any complaints
Okay.
about it. The PVC trim has been around again for, 25 years, something like that, without much problem.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Peg?
my condo development where I live is doing everything in Everlast and the Aztec and PVC. Now, we have the goal is to get a 30-year maintenance program. Oh, I'm sorry.
Pull it up a little bit.
My condo development is currently using Everlast, the Aztec for the trim, and I think I heard PVC, I'm on the board. And our goal is to get 30 years out of it. That's what they've told us, that we will not have to paint or do anything for at least 30 years. So it looks really good. The people that are putting it up are incredible. And we're quite pleased with it so far. You
Right.
can't tell the difference from wood.
Yeah, it's almost indistinguishable
Yeah.
until you get right on top of it. The detail in the material is very good. And it's not like vinyl siding where you have overlapping joints. The joints just butt up tight, just like a regular clapboard would. And it comes in, I think, 12-foot lengths. You know, our building is broken up into not narrow bays, but bays that are, in some cases, 12 feet. Distance between windows. You're not going to have a lot of seams in the siding on this. So again, that all goes towards helping the maintenance. You know, we'll have proper backup materials and drainage planes and so forth so that all the materials can last as long as possible. And I will move on from there unless there's any additional questions on the materials to the renderings.
Okay.
So we have added awnings along the Hutton Street, Maple Street, and Hobart Street sides. As you've seen, we've broken up the windows, changed the window layouts. Before, it was a number of single windows vertically. Made the whole thing look a lot more vertical. We've increased the size of the cornice line. And we've also added an entry canopy here that sticks out a little further, gives it a nice horizontal plane. Again, gives a little bit more presence to the front of the building and a little bit more coverage to that entry. And we've also changed some of the cornice lines. We've made them a little bit deeper in some of these three-story bays here. We've made the cornice line a little bit more prominent as well. Again, just to you can see a little bit more of a rhythm that's prominent and visible as the building marches down the street. Next slide, Mr. Chair.
Are those the colors of the awnings?
That's what's proposed, yes.
Red.
Yeah. So looking, again, you can see in this view the more prominent cornice line on the Maple and Hobart Street corner, the entry canopy. This is the recessed area that I talked about doing alternate material in. And again, the window surrounds a little bit darker. Since these are recessed and a little bit more prominent because they're being set back and are slightly different color, we're not doing any awnings over those, and they're on the residential side on Maple Street. I think it provides you'll see it in one of the other views, a little bit of a nicer rhythm to it. Makes it look a little less commercial on that street, but still kind of ties everything all together. This is the Maple and North Hutton Street corner. Again, you can see the awnings as they're moving around the building. The recessed area here at the residential living space, the cornice lines, and we've also bumped out the corners a little bit, just popped them out a little bit, and done the heavier cornice line at the corners, just to again provide some emphasis to those corners. And then you can see also this. Actually, go back, please, Parrot. Again, some of the awnings over the single windows, there's kind of a gap here where we have the recessed like this, and that, again, travels down Maple Street. Next slide, please. And this is a view of the kind of the inside of the courtyard of the building from kind of the corner of the parking lot towards North Putnam. And you can see, again, just the rhythm of the materials and the bays on the inside face of the courtyard, the different materials. We've got some awnings wrapping around the restaurant space towards the parking lot side, again, to provide a little bit more interest and activation there. And then you can see how heavily landscaped the courtyard is.
Are you proposing any signage on the awnings for the retail or the restaurant space?
Not at this point. I don't think we're anticipating that. We've got signage, which you'll see in a later slide, over each of the commercial entries.
Okay,
And only they're just flat signs against the building.
right.
We would like to keep them as simple as possible, as clean as possible. This is looking on Hobart Street, looking towards Maple Street at the corner where the restaurant outdoor seating space is for the restaurant. And again, the corner have become more prominent. It popped out just a little bit with the taller cornice line, which is unfortunately not as visible in this view. And then you'll see again later on kind of the rhythm, more of a head-on view of that side in one of the later renderings. Next slide, please, Jarrett. And again, looking at the outdoor dining area for the restaurant from Charter Street and kind of the corner of the Freight House. And to address your comment, we've got commercial entry for the restaurant here with a sign, the awning. And these entrances have been made wider and splayed out in the plan so that there's a little bit more rhythm to them. Windows, we've changed the window layout a little bit so that things line up better vertically. You can see in some cases how things line up a little bit better with the windows up above. And again, commercial entry signage, then awnings. And again, you'll see it a little bit better at one of the other views. Next slide, please. And this is the one I was mentioning. So you can see awnings. This is the gym area for the residents, and then commercial space with an entry. Signage here, which is a little bit hidden by the tree, and then commercial space with an entry, and awnings, and again, trying to work on the alignment of getting everything neatly aligned and having the facade be more regular. Commercial space, signage, and again, the entry space, again, the walls are splayed out, making it wider, more welcoming, activating the pedestrian experience there. Next slide, please, Jarrett. And this is a view looking down Maple Street, from Maple Street towards the Freight House, looking down Hobart. Again, with the awnings, you can't really see the signage at the commercial entries because they're linearly behind the awnings. And next slide. And again, Maple Street looking, I've got it north, it's actually probably more west, but you can see kind of the height relationship of the Maple Square project to the Atlantic Ambulance Building, and what we've done with the entry canopy, the window layout on the curved piece, the higher cornice line, how that reads more distinctive, I think, now, a little bit more detailed. And the next slide, please. Again, similar view, just a little bit different viewpoint, showing the same things. The rhythm of the awning as it goes down Maple Street, as I mentioned, and then here's another view of from the Freight House towards the Hobart Street facade. Okay, and these are just the exterior elevations in color. The top one is the Maple Street side. The bottom one is the Hobart Street side. And next page, Jarrett. And then this top one is the courtyard, the back of the building, as you're looking from the parking lot, kind of looking from south to north. So this would be the end of the restaurant space. The Freight House is over here. This is Hobart Street, and then North Hutton Street at that end, the three-story section along Hutton Street, North Hutton, and part of the four-story beyond it. And then this is the North Hutton Street section elevation. Again, this is the extent of the building from here to there on North Hutton. From here to there along North Hutton. And this piece is 3 stories, and from here on, which is kind of the extent of where the parking lot is. The satellite parking is 4 stories. And this is the back of the building in the courtyard area, the restaurant space, loading dock space, and the residential room. Behind this extension that way. And this is a roof plan showing, we've got the outline of the building, obviously, Maple Street down here, North Putnam, Hobart Street, and as I mentioned, looking at the section before, we've got HVAC lined in the center of the building, nothing along the North Putnam Street side beyond, this short section that's here. This is the lower three-story portion of the roof. Dots, essentially, the small rectangles are anticipated units. We have not met with a mechanical engineer to start designing the HVAC yet, obviously, because we're not that far along in the project to start doing that. Elevator penthouses in these locations, and then the solid line would be screening around all the equipment. Roof access would be somewhere over in this area, probably just one access that they need to do. There is not going to be any resident access to the roof.
Okay.
We do not anticipate any impact from noise from rooftop units. I've talked to an acoustical engineer. When I told him, I sent him over a set of the plans, a site plan. His comment to me was, with the height of the roof, the impact, if any, would be minimal. And then when I sent him cuts of similar HVAC units that we've used on another apartment project, he did not think that that would be a problem at all. The screening that we have now, we're showing as, screening just to hide the equipment. There is also acoustical screening that's available that if that is something that's necessary, that's something that we will implement. The units that we have specified in previous apartment buildings, it's 58 decibels for one of the units. That equivalent is conversation in a restaurant or an office space. It's not loud at all. So granted, there's a lot of units there, but the height of the building, the distance from the residential uses, we don't anticipate any noise impact at all. And if there is any issue, we'll be addressing it. We'll be analyzing before things get in place.
I would assume that you'd have a big hatch, because if you have a problem with those units, short of having a crane get up there, you'd want to be able to.
Yeah, big units typically do get craned in place. Anything for the
150
commercial
units?
spaces might.
Yeah.
The residential units, they're not much bigger than a suitcase. I mean,
Yeah.
they're typically, I think the ones we specified for the other apartment project, which the units are similar size to these, are like a foot by 18 inches by 30 maybe. They're not big. And those can be carried up through a roof hatch. Realistically, during initial construction, they'll be palletized probably and craned up into place just for efficiency of moving material. We anticipate the roof hatch would be 4 feet by 4 feet, something like that. It's not going to be huge.
Questions from the board at this point? Lou?
Yeah, just a question in terms of the, couple of questions in terms of the awnings.
Yes.
How far out do they jut out into the, sort of over the sidewalk area? I mean,
Right
is it-
now, we've got them shown sticking out 3 feet.
Okay,
So,
Gotcha.
and they're, they're showing about a foot high at the vertical portion, and then they slope up, another 18 inches to 2 feet. So they're probably about 3 feet high and about 3 feet wide, maybe a little less on the height.
got it, okay. So enough room to run under it during a rainstorm if you need to?
Yes. Yeah, but not too prominent to be, wings on the building sticking
it.
out too far.
And in terms of the air conditioning units, are the types of units, would these be similar to like, where you'd see like, almost sort of like, combination heating, air conditioning, sort of like the sort of the Mitsubishi mini split type of things?
Yes, exactly. That's what we're thinking about
As
at
opposed
this
to the
point.
traditional sort of, large sort of
Right.
condenser sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
We're looking for as much energy efficiency as possible.
And those are generally seem like a lot quieter too than
They
the
are
traditional one.
substantially quieter. Again, 58 decibels, and that's what's specified is Mitsubishi mini
Okay.
splits on the other building.
Yeah, because that would be a concern I'd have, just to make sure, considering the neighbors like on North Putnam and all,
Right.
that you'd have noise issues.
Yeah, and again, the residential units start along here someplace. Obviously,
we've got some commercial with the ambulance, some of the other commercial buildings before the residential starts further down on Maple Street. Again, we don't want it to affect the streetscape either with noise. It's not just the residential units that we have to take into consideration. It's the enjoyment of everyone that's going to be around, people in the freight yard, on the rail trail, just people walking through town.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jim.
Yep. Any other questions? All right.
Okay. So that kind of wraps up my portion of things.
Are you doing the lighting or someone else?
Someone else would be addressing lighting.
Okay.
Jared, can you go to that sheet, please?
Thank you.
For the record, Bob Eulig from Halverson Tyne Bond Studio, Landscape Architects. And as Nancy had indicated, since the last meeting, we had some discussions with the lighting department, and I think, this project, when we first came to the town, it kind of got them thinking a little bit more about fixtures, so that after we met with you all, they said, it was fortuitous because it was good timing. It got them thinking about fixtures more specifically. And so they had talked to lighting manufacturers about street lights that they're thinking about along, one more, maybe? Two more? There we go. Thank you. So they had been, that was good. They have been talking to lighting manufacturers about alternative fixtures. And so you briefly saw there that they're looking at along Maplewood and potentially along Hobart. I think they're still having discussions with the planning office about exact locations, there you go, thank you, about pendant fixtures. So you can see up in the right-hand corner the variety of fixtures that the town has been talking about. So I tried to provide a diagram that shows you different fixtures in different locations. So if we look at fixture C is kind of middle of the right, so we show you the fixture as it looks on a pole on the left-hand side here. And then kind of up close what that lantern looks like. So that is what the city has been proposing now for Maple Street and Hobart Streets. And so that's what we're showing in both those locations. So it would be a continuous fixture along both sides. And the thinking is that, as we understand it, is that they may carry that further downtown so that there's a unified element to the look and feel. Then in terms of, in terms of lighting fixture B, keeping with that kind of same historic appearance, in the upper right-hand corner, again, pole and light hole appearance, illuminated up here, and then more of an enlargement of that fixture. We were thinking about carrying that motif over into the freight parcel park. So you've got kind of a consistent, within the public realm, you've got a consistent look and feel. Then within the parking lot area, we're essentially looking at a very simple shoebox light. Again, the pole is a double, is a single. The idea of those meet your dark sky compliance where there's a true cutoff. And basically, it's a fixture that doesn't draw a lot of attention to itself, which we think is the right thing to do. And then we're looking at essentially in the back area where it's identified in blue as D, as a bit more of a contemporary fixture. That won't be in the public realm. That's more associated with the tenant amenity space on the back side of the building. So that's the four kind of different fixtures that we'd be planning on using. Again, kind of streetscape, freight park, parking lot, and then the amenity terrace area.
So we would pretty much agree to work with the town at whatever the town comes up with so that it keeps the uniformity,
Yes, so we've started that discussion
on the Maple and Hobart Street.
already, but we did want to show you that we can do that
Sure.
with these cut sheets.
Great, thank you. Looks good.
Anything else?
You want to go over the fencing and the amenity space, just so we can see what you're proposing there? And then, right. I think there was some depiction of that.
I know there was.
So basically, we aren't decided on color of the metal component, but both the areas adjacent to the patios, so upper right-hand corner is the look and feel of the screens between the amenity terrace and the patios, so it'd be a vertical wood slat with metal that's basically supporting it off the ground. And so in both instances, that the hardwood that we're showing you with kind of a paraffin finish on it would be the wood finish for both. And then in the upper left-hand corner, it's kind of the look and feel of the separation from the patios from the amenity space where it would be planted up in that upper left-hand corner. Then in the bottom left-hand corner is our thinking about, it would be more of a horizontal approach to the separation between the parking lot and the amenity terrace area. And so again, kind of same materials, and in terms of verticals being metal, painted metal, in a complementary finish to the architecture, and then the wood slats would be again that hardwood.
And what are the heights on that, do you have?
I think the height is accurate for the back patio terraces, which is like about a 6-foot height to give separation. I think we're thinking about a lower 4-foot height because it's basically just giving some physical separation between the amenity area and the parking lot.
And I think I asked at the last meeting about potential amenity use on the farther parking lot to the right of the building, if you go back to the site plan.
Yeah, I think the team concluded we didn't think that was an appropriate location, given that it was a satellite parking lot. We didn't really want to encourage people to be hanging out in that area. It was just more for parking, but we were going to encourage people to either utilize the freight park or utilize the amenity terrace behind the building.
Okay, and snow storage? Do we have that, are you gonna review that, or
Scott, do you want to speak to that?
did anyone else have questions before we jump to snow storage? Thank you.
So, good evening. For the record, Scott Cameron with the Moore and Cameron Group, 66 Elm Street in Danvers. Yeah, so we did a calculation on the snow storage, and what it amounts to, without exceeding a 6 to 8 foot mound, you're talking about a 12-inch storm. So it's quite a big, and that's over the paved surface area of the property, which, again, this site had a lot of area for snow storage, and that's before they would have to do any removal of snow.
Additional questions from the last meeting for the engineer or the team? Or the architect?
Can you just comment about the construction ideally? I know with construction, there's never anything that goes according to plan, but the key milestones for site work to start, I know, Scott, you talked about it last time, but for the benefit of the people here tonight and watching, getting the building weather tight, could this be phased, or is it a one build out? And ideally, when would an occupancy permit potentially get done? Assuming we know supply chains and all that stuff, but if you had your druthers, how long should this take? This is a very significant project, big investment by the developer in the town of Danvers, but this is going to be a multi-year project.
Yeah, there's no question this is a big investment, and I'm not going to speak to the numbers, but with regards to the schedule, to tap dance around said supply chain and labor issues that we're all experiencing in every aspect of our lives, what I would expect to see first, and pretty soon, as early as this fall, is the demolition beginning to occur. So as we're starting to develop, the next step from here, from planning in this process, is we start to get into our construction document phase. And that's where we're starting to engineer the building, the utility systems, electrical, mechanical, plumbing, everything that has to do with the building, the site, all these little details get worked out in a very extensive set of plans. Demolition will be happening in parallel, so I would expect roughly you should see kind of a clean site ready to start new construction coming into the spring, and maybe even as early as this winter, depending on how the demolition process occurs, because there's obviously procedures we have to follow for that too. And yeah, it could very well be a 2-year build out. It is a single phase of construction, so everything would be done concurrently. You might see, for example, the parking area being done last. That might be the last thing that is done, because it's probably going to end up being an area where they might put a construction trailer or administrative infrastructure associated with the project to keep the main building area free, clear. And yeah, I don't think that's a bad estimate. It's very hard to predict schedules, but we're moving along. I know we have a lot of channels and connections, and there will be a GC involved pretty soon. That'll help, obviously a big part of that selection process also goes with their connections, be able to get materials. So I think that's a realistic projection.
Okay, thank you.
The only other thing I had was, can you just briefly go over the wayfinding and directional signage and maybe the proposed building signs for the restaurant and retail space?
Yeah. So I think the bigger thing for us was how are we getting delivery trucks? How do they know where to go? We don't want them stopping in the street per se. So we did put some signage to direct delivery trucks to the rear of the building at each, both the North Putnam and the Hobart Street entrances. With regards to the retail and restaurant signage, each door entry to those spaces will have its own board sign just mounted on the wall of the building. And we also talked about at the last meeting a kiosk or some sort of signage just explaining what the park is and maybe some of the background history, similar to what you see in other areas along the rail trail as far as kind of informational. As far as other wayfinding, relatively typical, manual and uniform traffic control signage, stop signs that you would ordinarily see. We don't have any restrictions on the flow, although circulation for vehicles is two-way traffic on all the aisles, so we don't have any one-way or things like that. And obviously the residents would know how to enter into the building. And I would fully expect that as they start to occupy and get a feel for it and identify things, there's persistent and perpetual maintenance of wayfinding. So they add signage and particular things, mail kiosks where they pick up the mail that gets into the building. And there's also going to be a concierge service here as well inside the building.
So the only question I have, did you look into perhaps, I know you're going to put the signs right on the building. In the presentation that we had for the 40R and for the further development along the street, they proposed, I forget what you call them, the signs that protrude perpendicular, I guess, from the building. As you're walking along and you're going to see that, or maybe you're going to see that better from a vehicle than.
We had originally shown some blade signs.
Blade signs, that's it.
Yep. Those, we felt to get them of a scale that made them really visible, they would end up getting too big. And we thought that it didn't really do a whole lot to activate the streetscape. I think whatever ends up there, you've only got 3 commercial spaces in the restaurant. I think people are pretty much gonna know, unless they're from out of town, anyone that's in town is gonna know what is there for commercial uses. So we thought that having the awnings was more important to activate the streetscape, and having the signs above the entries was probably a better aesthetic way to handle that.
Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to, because I know obviously downtown has a lot of that blade signage. My building has one. So what I was just asking Mr. Massey about was whether or not a blade sign might make sense on the freight building, where we would have a cafe restaurant tenant there, and that would kind of fit with some of the aesthetic in the downtown, help tie that together. I think it would be appropriate on that building too, where we could entertain that.
Okay. Are you going to have a monument or marquee signage just addressing the name of the building, or?
Yes, we haven't developed exactly what. Yes, we will. We haven't developed exactly what that might look like. I've seen on similar buildings where they actually spell out the name of the building and actually have it on basically raised letters that stand up along the edge here. I think that may be a little bit too gaudy for what we're thinking of. I'm thinking that some signage under here that will be lit from above to identify the building, maybe a number on the building up here, but maybe saying Maple Square under the canopy. Something subtle but still informative, and then obviously with the address somewhere more prominent. But again, subtle, obviously nothing lit necessarily, in conformance with what the signage regulations are.
Okay, but David, would that come back to us, you think, or would that be something for staff?
Changes in signage in general?
Well, where it's not proposed yet, so it's something that, if we're gonna approve this
There-
plan this evening, it's not proposed, so it's gonna come back.
There's probably 15 different types of signage that are allowed in this bylaw. So as long as they're complying with form to one of those, should be good to go.
Okay. So
There's
we would need a minor modification for things like that.
You shouldn't unless it was outside of those that were already previously approved.
Okay.
If you would like us, as a condition, to come back and show you the signage that were proposed and visit with you about that signage, we're certainly happy to do that.
What's the pleasure of the board on that? Anyone? Jean?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the timing, it might be good to get some updates.
Yeah, I just think it is a landmark. I mean, major
Sure.
keystone of the town, too.
Yeah, no, that'd be nice. I'd like to see what comes back.
Sure,
at the
we
appropriate
would
time.
certainly take a condition that we would, once we get further along in the process, we'll come back with the sign proposal. Even if it's fully permitted under the bylaw, we're happy to come back and discuss it with you and take your suggestions and input, as certainly the developer's done just thus far.
Other questions from the board? Go ahead, Corey.
A question about the demolition. What kind of hazardous materials remediation, those kind of issues are you expecting to encounter?
Scott, are you the one to speak to that? Obviously, the demolition permit process itself has a laundry list of things that we have to go
Yeah.
through. Certainly, I think we're anticipating asbestos, and we'll comply with all of the other requirements that we need to as we go through that process. That's a very heavy regulated aspect of the project.
I'm just asking for general public information as much
Yep.
as is known.
Sure.
So we've already,
You could
Nick,
just identify yourself,
yeah,
thank you.
Nick Fay, for the record, AM15 Management. So we are, already have received our asbestos survey. We've done a very, very detailed survey. There's a good amount of asbestos that we're pulling out of the building. We're also pulling out different metals and things like that. They're not necessarily contaminated, but to optimize the loads, so that we're basically grouping the materials that they go off in as efficient way as possible. It's part of a cost savings, but also it's just better for the environment and everything involved. So, and then there'll be different soil remediation, things like that, and we have detailed reports on that as well. So,
Thank you.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jean.
Are you considering any LEED or WELL certifications?
At this point, I think as we've indicated in some of the submissions, that comes in the next step. And the building is going to be as environmentally friendly as we can make it. LEED certification, I'm not sure if that's going to happen, but certainly low-impact development and other aspects, as we discussed some of them at the last meeting, would be built into the project as we proceed forward. But that's really the next step of design.
Okay, thanks.
Lou?
I just had some more general questions, is that?
Sure.
Okay.
It's a good time for it.
Yeah, okay, just a question, just in terms of, I know we were talking about sort of, sort of wayfinding in terms of parking and all. I know one of the concerns, I think, that was raised the last time was parking across the street for the, sort of in the municipal lot as well as Maple Street Church. So I know that currently, right now, there are spots, I think there are close to about 20 spots that are sort of designated for Maple Street Church on Sundays. But I wasn't sure what was, I know in your update, you said that you'll provide appropriate parking signs for the Maple Street Church to address any sort of concerns in terms of use. So could you just describe a little further what's planned?
Yes, we will work with the Maple Street Church to provide signage on their property to the extent that they wish that, to sign it as, this is church parking. This is not Freight House Park parking.
Yep.
And we would work with them to do that, and also put up whatever other signage we need to do on our property that would direct folks to park in the appropriate parking spaces. I think the spaces that you were referring to for the Maple Street Church that are designated for Sunday are within the municipal lot, and that is not going to change.
Got it, yeah.
And what is going to, I think, help in the area are the new streets, public parking street spaces that are being provided as part of this development with the realignment and improvements on Hobart Street.
Okay, okay. Just one further question, just with respect, I know you mentioned that you had that there was a meeting there was a meeting recently with some of the, I think, some town meeting members, as well as Representative Kearns. Could you just, give a little more detail in terms of what transpired at that meeting? Was there any, any sort of unresolved issues at all from that?
Sure, I'm going to ask Nick or Tony.
Good evening, Tony Libro, Chief Operating Officer and CFO of AAM 15 Management. So we got a chance to meet with some town meeting members as well as Representative Kearns about their concerns about the building, specifically size. There was some parking questions. We met for approximately 2 hours or so. In some cases, we agreed to disagree. In other cases, we were able to find common ground. But I think the general tenor was, we're here to listen and try to make as many changes as we can. I think they commented earlier this evening, and obviously they are here and have the opportunity to speak in a little bit, that we did take into account many of their suggestions that they had where we could. Obviously, it is a building of some size, and that's, causes some concern, but with the awnings and certainly the different features to the circular piece on the corner, I think answered some of their questions, as well as there were some other questions specific to parking, which we have cleaned up.
Thank you. Good for now, Jim.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I'm all set.
All right, at this time, I'm going to open it up to the audience to have questions and comments regarding the new changes that have been presented this evening. If you would, when you approach the mic, please identify yourself. David?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. David McKenna, 383 Andover Street, former selectman. A question first and then a couple of comments. Any kind of time you have this kind of demolition, aside from the hazardous materials, you also very often have a diaspora of rodents. What assurances do the neighbors have that they're not going to be inundated with rats? What measures are they taking to prevent that?
Through the chair. So as part of the demolition process and the permitting through the building department, they're going to have to do a pre-demolition survey with a specialist that deals with that. So they're going to trap and remove as many rodents as they can beforehand. And then during the demolition process, there is regular maintenance and upkeep of that to also track and trap and take care of that. So it's part of the demolition permitting process.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A comment now. Several of the engineers have referred to Danvers as a city. It is not a city, it's a town. And I think most of the people here want to keep it as a town. We don't want to look like Salem or Beverly, where you showed the other buildings of comparable size and type. I think that having this kind of a large building is going to make a significant change in the total appearance of downtown Danvers. It may lead to the rest of the downtown going that direction. I thought when this zoning was proposed that large buildings like this were supposed to be stepped back unless they apply for either a special permit or a variance. Is that part of this application, or is this allowed as it is?
Attorney McCann? Yep, so this is part of it. We have a special permit and a site plan.
And that is at the will of the board. That's not a must issue if they meet certain conditions.
The
That's it.
special permit has several conditions that will be discussed once we're near the end of this meeting, and that have requirements that have to be discerned by the board and approved by the board, correct? Yes. Just, again, by way of response to your initial comments, as you know, this zone was overwhelmingly approved by the town meeting, the 40R. The other zones, as we go downtown toward High Street, have also been approved. The heights and so on are part of, and this not just to you, but to people in the audience, and we have received, some letters of concern and so on. The density and the sizes have been, approved, or the discounted parking and things like that have been approved, by the town meeting, and it was studied for extensively by this board with input from the town people.
I was at many of those study committee
Right, so as you
hearings,
know,
Mr.
so
Chairman.
this isn't coming out of left field, the size, the height and the size is not coming out of left field. These were shown as depictions as things that may happen, and the heights are within, what the requirements are. So, I know there's concerns about water usages with any development. People talk about that, but all this stuff is getting vetted, as you know, by town staff and departments. in
Thank you,
addition
Mr.
to
Chairman.
us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Carla King, Precinct 8, but I own the property across from the parking lot, and I would love to see some pictures of the new proposed parking lot.
Of the
Configuration,
the
however.
change, yes.
Yeah.
Sure. Nancy?
Jarrett can pull up the site plan that shows what we're proposing, which is right in, right out, to address specifically your concern, so that what the original proposal was that allowed left turns, people waiting to make that left turn, headlights potentially you were concerned about going right across the street into that, into your residential.
Saying, so that's why I wanted to see the
Okay. So, Scott, would you like to speak to that, or would you like me to do it?
Actually, go back to the site plan. Well, first, while we're on this, actually, because you can see that. So Bob Ulick did the landscaping, but he added in a lot more screening here. You can see how many trees and shrubs are in this area, and this addresses the head-on parking here and potential lights. And if you go back to the site plan, and then here, so we added an island in the middle, and we angled the exit so that the cars now come out and they'll be angled kind of towards the adjacent traffic. So it's a right in, and then it's a right out. So instead of 90 degrees to the street facing up your driveway, it's going to be on an angle coming out. And where it's a right out, you don't have cars stopping to take that left turn and wait, so it's a smoother and quicker turn.
Other questions? Mr. Bates, saw you first.
Good evening, Bill Bates, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 4. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is just to understand why the step backs are not in there, and I guess that will be a special permit. But as a longtime town meeting member, and I'm excited about this project. This is what we wanted. We wanted walkability. We wanted apartments down there. But we were real careful when we developed this, these guidelines, that you had to have a specific step back on those buildings to get a certain height. And I would hope that the board, the planning board would hold to those commitments that were made to us as town meeting members, that they were going to be upheld. You know, there's always a chance of a special permit, and anybody can ask for a special permit, but I'd like to hear a discussion about why this building is not stepped back a little bit more. This first picture that's here is gorgeous, but we talked about that being stepped back, and that's very important to me as a town meeting member. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bates. Attorney McCann, do you want to address that? Okay.
Part of the reason for, we feel the streetscape, I've looked at some other buildings that are stepped back. Some of the examples that we've shown, and pretty much all of them, I know they're in cities and not in a town per se. But the facade regularity, the way we're trying to break it up and make, since it's a longer building, make it broken up as it marches down the street, having that step back kind of eliminates our ability, or makes it more difficult to make that rhythm and the breaking up of the long length of the building. It makes it more difficult. It also reduces our floor plate, which I know is not a concern of the board necessarily, but we're trying to, you know, have as consistent a building as possible, and we just felt that the step back didn't really make as much of a difference as the feel from the street. You know, once you're on the street, if you're in between buildings, you're not really going to notice that height, I don't think, as much as you think you might. But again, that's an opinion. It's, you know, I'm not sure if that addresses the comment sufficiently. Go ahead.
I can also add to that from a site planning perspective. As you know, the district itself has a 0-foot front yard setback, so you would normally expect that the building would be right at the front street line. What we did, however, is we didn't put the building at the street line. We set it back from the street, so the whole building is set back at so at the intersection of Charter, that corner of the building is set back 17 feet from the lot line. As you get to the intersection Hobart and Maple on the Hobart it's set back 18 feet. And then as you go back down towards North Putnam, it's set back 15 feet. And all of that space is going to become public domain walkways and sidewalks.
Is that setback from the curb or from the sidewalk?
From the lot line. The curb line goes out an additional, you know, the width of the parking space, which is 8 feet plus 5, another 13 feet before you get to the curb line. So there's quite an extensive buffer in here between the building and the property line. So we kind of took that, you know, we took the whole building and set it back because the focus was more on that streetscape.
So by way of example, on the building that's on Maple Street now, that above the Georgie salon there, that was done over by another applicant of Attorney McCann's, they did step that back, I think, I'm not sure if that's 10 feet or how far back is that, do you know?
I don't know. Scott also worked on that project for Maple.
It's the fourth floor was stepped back. I believe it is.
I think they recessed a deck. It's not the whole.
Yeah, some of it's stepped back.
Can't recall for
There's
sure.
an
I
angle
don't
that
think it
has to
steps
be
back.
met, From
Huh?
across the street of 40 feet to the top, it's the angle. And I don't know how close they are, if they have that much sidewalk, and then the height of the building.
I think the answer is what Scott just was describing, is the fact that while we're not stepping back individual floors, this project steps back the whole building and creates public space in the front, new public space, new sidewalks, and then also new public space on our property. So the purpose of the step backs during the discussion of the bylaw was to prevent the tunnel type of effect. we've prevented the tunnel effect by stepping the whole thing back and creating these very wide walking space, public seating space. We've got benches, we've got walking spaces that are quite wide, far wider than standard sidewalk width, 5 or 6 feet, significantly wider than that. So we've met the intent of the bylaw and the intent of not creating this tunnel in a different way, but we've met the intent of it. And as Joe was saying, by not creating these step backs to try and make that work, which would disrupt the architectural design of the building, we've created and realized the desire and the intent by stepping the whole thing back, and also creating more public space. A step back of the upper levels doesn't create more public realm space, which we are able to do here, as well as eliminating the tunnel effect. And the bylaw, and I'll get into this later when we start talking about special permits, but the bylaw allows you to grant special permits for design criteria, for design features, and this is one of them. We've asked for the special permit, and the special permit should be granted if we meet the requirements of the special permit, which we think we do, and as I've indicated in the application, we meet the intent of the bylaw, as I've just said. We meet the requirements for the various special permits that we've asked for, and this happens to be one of them. So if you look at the intent, which is to avoid and prevent the tunnel, we've done that here. We've met that here with an interesting design that flows well. And on top of that, created significant public realm and public open space in front of these buildings, addressing another intent of the bylaw, which is to create pedestrian space and pedestrian connectivity.
Questions from the board on that point? Tori?
Not exactly a question. I just want to respond to the public, to why I feel very comfortable with this lack of a setback. There's a park across Hobart Street, and then we have the firehouse, the old firehouse, which is very well utilized and hopefully long-lasting. And I don't see any threat of the prospect of a canyon effect on either Hobart or Maple Street. And that is why I feel very comfortable with this special permit request.
Thank you. Others? Peg?
Well, I would feel comfortable too, given the situation and the fact that they do have such wide sidewalks, and they're providing for pedestrian access, seating, things like that. I remember when we went through the hearings, the step back was for the tunneling effect, but there was an angle, and you've got to be close to the angle of, how high is your building, 40 feet?
49?
49 feet. You can't be that far off that angle and get across the street with
Right.
those wide sidewalks.
That's right.
Lou?
Yeah, I share the view of Peg and Tori as well with respect to that. I'm not as obviously cognizant of it, but I think that I'm satisfied that we don't have a concern in terms of the tunneling effect, and I am also happy as well that the building is set back, so there is a wider area for pedestrians to walk, and just additional space.
John?
No, I'm comfortable too. I think the entire building being set back eliminates the tunnel effect, so I'm supportive.
Jean?
Same. I think it's a great compromise.
Okay, I would agree with the board on that. Do we have other questions from the audience? Mr. Duggan had his hand up earlier, and then we'll get to you, Mr. Bradstreet.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matthew Duggan, 41 Chase Street. At your last meeting, I had kind of delved into the traffic flow around the project, and I want to kind of zero in on the segment of Hobart from Charter to Maple, and I believe that that's a 50-foot wide town-owned right-of-way. And so it's not clear to me what the plan is in terms of widening the roadway to allow a more defined, at least 2 lanes going north, so the right lane could make the right going east on Maple. So I'm kind of confused. Is the applicant getting sort of access or the ability to redefine what the roadway is going to look like? And not only the roadway, but the sidewalks as well, because I don't believe that's the purview of this board to allow that type of permission. So perhaps you could clarify that.
Attorney McCann?
Well, I think it is the purview of the board through site plan approval to allow improvements both on-site as well as off-site improvements. You do it all the time with site plans, and create new sidewalks, particularly in situations of this bylaw that require us to do those things. I don't know if Scott has anything to add to that or no. It's part of this process. The planning board deals with the creation of streets. That's part of your purview, but also as part of site plan approval, it's very common to have improvements in public rights-of-way, improvements in sidewalks, and through this whole process to lead us to this point, we have had extensive meetings with town engineer, the DPW director, talking about the creation of the sidewalk areas and the maintenance and how that works and whatever easements might have to go to the town. All very common aspects of development that we do with projects all the time.
So just focusing on the Hobart Street section from Charter to Maple that he's concentrating on, could you just address, is there going to be, I guess, a reshaping of the street to allow for the public parking on each side in addition to some sidewalk reconfiguration? Scott?
Yep. It's a good question. I think it's important to, for everybody to understand kind of the process and expectations. So just taking a step back, whenever we develop land and there's an interface with the public street, which every project has to have because we have to have frontage, those projects will involve trenching to the street for utility connections, water, sewer, storm sewer, electric, gas, communications. We need to oftentimes reset curb, construct sidewalks, driveway aprons. All of these things happen, and usually by the end of that, when the street's pretty chopped up, in my experience in Danvers, they make the developer bear the cost of resurfacing the whole street in front of that project when it's chopped up like that. This is no different, except the work and the interface, the whole project is geared towards the public interface. The whole district is intended to improve that. And so our design was all geared towards that. And in this case, the developer is going to bear the cost of a significant upgrade, not only to what you see on the surface when it's done, which will include the new sidewalks, it will include the new granite curbing, street trees, extensive street trees, which will also, by the way, screen the building and improve that experience on the street. The parking spaces, those are all things you're going to see. But things that you might not see that are also significant improvements that the developer is going to bear. The flooding that happens on Hobart Street right now, because it's so flat, that's going to be fixed. The road's going to be recrowned. It's going to be fully regraded and repaved. They're going to go below ground. The storm sewer, both on Hobart and Maple and North Putnam, it's 100 years old. It doesn't work as well as it can or should. It's not up to current code. They're going to be replacing all of that infrastructure, resetting pipe, lowering it. Catch basins will have sumps. So environmentally, they're getting the whole street brought up to a current construction standard. The sewer that services Hobart Street, In the engineering report you received from Mr. King, he outlines that they're aware that that sewer has a sag in it. This is an existing problem that's going to be replaced. So there's a lot of work that happens on a project like this that directly benefits the public. And we've talked about the interface, the park and the street, but yes, Hobart Street will be reconstructed along that frontage, and we do this in the course of any site plan approval, any definitive subdivision, any approvals that go as part of the development plans, and we always come through here. And then they go on to the next phase and working with DPW and Mr. Lane and his staff and Steve King will all be overseeing this work. And they're out there daily. I know because I get the calls to come out and look at stuff with them during the construction process. So hopefully that answers the question, but I think that this project has a significant, I guess from utility, surface, public amenity, it's tremendous. And we did focus a lot of the design there.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Duggan?
I'm just not comfortable with kind of having the applicant define how the public roadway is going to be used. I think that's something that's more appropriate to be discussed by the Traffic Advisory Commission or Committee and the Select Board. The Select Board are the traffic commissioners, and so they dictate signage and the way the roadway is used. And then just one other point I wanted to make. For discussion of our bylaws, and specifically the character-based zoning that applies to this property that was approved, I think, in December of 17, I think it's really the board, and this just a suggestion that the board should be going to town staff, to these two gentlemen. That's why they're here. If they're the ones that should interpret our bylaws, not the applicant. That's all I have. Thank you.
Well, if there's a question by anyone on the board, I think for town staff, then we will definitely, obviously, we use the staff, and actually David is the zoning enforcement officer, as we know, along with the building inspector. So my feeling is anything that's being proposed has already been reviewed by staff along with all of the department heads, as would be done with any project. It has to comply with state law. So other questions from the audience? Oh, sorry, Mr. Bradstreet. Then how could I forget you?
Bill Bradstreet, Town Meeting Member, Precinct 1. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to understand by merely moving the building back 15 feet eliminates the tunnel effect. Even if you step the building up as its height grows, is still a tunnel effect per se, at least the way I look at it. I'm only one person, but that's the way I see the tunnel effect either way. I'm also disappointed with hearing that the cost of this building or the changes that are going to have to be made to the services used as an argument against us asking for whatever we need. You take a project on of this size, there's cost associated with, and that's the obligation of the person proposing this project. I don't understand how they can use the cost to them as an argument why it needs to be done or should be done or shouldn't be done. I don't understand. If I were to take a job or to do a job, I would understand I bear the expense, and I can't use that as an argument for, gee, maybe. I just don't understand that. And again, just moving the building back doesn't eliminate that tunnel effect. I'd hate to see this done and then every other building down Maple Street to the square. It's still going to be a tunnel. It's bad enough, quote unquote, as it is. It's Danvers, the town. It's what I grew up in. think most of us did, got accustomed to it. Change is good in certain respects. I don't care for this change. Maybe there are better plans, maybe there aren't. I'm just not happy with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes?
Good evening, Kathy Simon, Precinct 7, Town Meeting Member, Traffic Advisory Committee Member, and Parking Officer for the downtown. Thank you to the developers for spending time with us, for caring enough to spend the time to answer some of the questions we have. I was refraining from having any comments, and I think it's a little premature for me to have some comments at this point because I haven't heard the waivers yet. To me, everything in this meeting boils down to we got the dog and pony show last time of all the good things you're going to do for us and your justification for all these waivers. But we really haven't delved into the issues that I think are before us, and they're going to help you make your decision and also the developer make their decision on whether this project is feasible for them. So because we haven't talked about the waivers yet, which I think is the most important thing, then I felt I had to stand up because my issue with this project is not how pretty it is and not the landscaping work that you've done or the money you're all sinking in for amenities. It's the density of this project for this part of town. I've talked with the developer about my issues that I thought we have with traffic and that pertain to the bottleneck that I think we're going to see on Maple Street. As you come down through the square and you're going straight through, there's 5 car lengths before you have to take a left-hand turn. And it is 1 lane in each direction here. And so if cars, but again, here I get into minutia when these folks haven't decided whether they're going to take the project yet. So my hope is that we talk about the waivers and that we determine what we can live with and what you're going to vote on, and then they can decide, and then we can get into some of the minutia. But my issue again is the density. The bylaw, which I voted on and bought into, and 3 years ago, so we spent with our consultants getting all of our buy-in on this project, and each of the line items that you all heard about, I did too, and they're not in this project. But I'm willing to compromise. I wonder if the developer is. They are looking to put in, our bylaw allows for 36 units per acre. This is a 4-acre project. I could see 80 units in this project instead of 144. Then we'd be in keeping with our bylaw. But I don't know what promises have been made by staff or by other departments to this group. I'm interested in knowing about that.
I think that comment was out of order.
Okay. Well, I don't know. I just don't know. And that's why I'd like to hear from the board, and I
That
hope.
comment was out of order.
Okay, I respect that.
This board is the board that makes the decision.
Okay.
So, thank you.
So I'm glad we're going to talk about waivers and
We are going to talk about
discussions
that.
that are
I
gonna be
did
made.
carve out a little time for public comment, which is right now.
Thank you
And then we
for
are
your
going to
time.
talk about the special permit and the waivers, and then we can go back to public comment after board comment. So unless there's other further questions at this point, yes, ma'am, if you could please identify yourself.
Lois McKenzie, Precinct 3. I just wanted to state my feelings. We adopted all the bylaws and everything for this a few years ago, how the town was going to be set up, how it was going to be used. And when I saw this, and I printed off 6 pages of waivers, it's like, why did we make all these bylaws? That's my only question, if you could keep that in mind. Why we came up with all these rules and how we want to do it, and then we're faced with special permits, waivers. Let's just keep that in mind, please.
Thank you. Attorney McCann, if we could, let's go through the proposed special permit items, the waivers, and just if you would, just recite the requirements for the special permit, and we can, if you would, while you address that first, so it's into the record.
Okay, so this project, let's be clear, doesn't require a variance, not a single one. This project has been designed to meet the requirements of the bylaw. And the bylaw allows certain densities, and I must disagree with the math. What we are proposing is in fact 36 units per acre. So we do meet the density requirement. We have a little over 4 acres. And we do meet that, and that is a density that is permitted by special permit. It's not a variance. The other items that we're asking for as far as special permits and waivers, specifically the special permits are called out in the bylaw as permits that you have the authority to grant. And again, not variances. They're built into the bylaw as long as we meet certain requirements. The waivers are generally design type of waivers that, again, built in specifically stated in the bylaw, you have the authority, looking at the totality of the site, looking at the design to be able to grant waivers. And that's what we've asked for. So we do need to be very clear. This is not a variance project. That's a different animal. We would be before a different board. These special permits are permits that we are allowed to request and receive without any variance of the bylaw. So I think what I should do perhaps is go through the special permits and talk about what the criteria is for those. This is all outlined in the application, but I'll do it here as well.
Thank you.
So the first special permit is maximum number of dwelling units per building. We have requested a single building, commercial on the first floor, residential above. The bylaw has a maximum number of units per building of 24, unless we seek a special permit. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're going through. The next special permit is a density bonus requirement that permits 36 units per acre. We meet, again, as you'll see in a moment, the requirements for that. The parking requirement table, we have more parking than what the bylaw says we need. The bylaw says we need 197 parking spaces for the uses proposed, commercial and residential. Very complicated formula in the bylaw, but you do the calculations. They're shown on the site plan sheet C6. We are required to have 197 parking spaces. We're proposing a few more than that, 204 parking spaces. But because we're proposing a couple more, we need a special permit to have that little bit of wiggle room in parking spaces. So we're requesting a special permit for that. We are also proposing street side parking. We have street side parking along Hobart Street. We have street side parking along North Putnam Street. We need a special permit for that. It's not that it's a bad thing. It's not that the density is a bad thing. It's just that we're requesting to have street side parking, so we have to go through a special permit process. So we bring that to your attention, we discuss it in more detail, and we meet the criteria, and then we are in fact entitled to that special permit. So those are the general special permits that we are requesting. And then there's under the bylaw defined as design special permits. So this has to do with general design type elements. The first one is the site development area. The site development area, as we've shown you, consists of really, it's 16 parcels, but it's 3 separate sections: freight house, mixed use, and the parking lot area. And there's streets in between. So these parcels are not all connected. So is that a bad thing? No, but we have to ask for a special permit for that. It's a design special permit. there is a provision for access and utility pedestrian passage to allow within the building pedestrian passageways. And we have dealt with that, with this design, having pedestrian passageways every 50 feet or every 100 feet or whatever doesn't make sense with this building design. That's what you consider, is the building design as we've shown it. And what we're proposing here to meet that intent is the large corridor coming off of the rounded section at the intersection. That is a pedestrian passage that goes all the way through the building and connects the pedestrian areas on Maple Street and Hobart Street with the parking area in the back, with the amenity space in the back, and creates the pedestrian interaction, and that's what the bylaw intended. We also have, rather than passageways, we actually have commercial units on along Hobart Street that allow access in off of Hobart Street. So we feel that we meet the intent of that. Parking access and screening section, we need a special permit for that because we're showing 2 curb cuts into the mixed-use section and 2 curb cuts into the accessory parking area. The bylaw says we can only have 1 curb cut into the lot. Well, that makes sense when you have a lot that's not very big, but when you have a lot this size, you don't want just 1 curb cut. That's not a good layout. So in order to propose 2 curb cuts, we have to ask for a special permit, and that's what we've done here. The facade composition for commercial and mixed-use buildings, this has to do with the width of the building. We're proposing a building that's 252 feet along Maple Street and 270 feet along Hobart Street, where 100 feet is permitted without a special permit. But if we want to do a larger building, we can, but we have to ask for a special permit, and that's what we're proposing. Then there are a number of elements under section 18.7.7, the mixed-use building. Oh, everyone's favorite, the build-to zone. It's not easily understood, but the bylaw has a build-to zone, a BTZ, with a minimum of 20 and a minimum of 0 and a maximum of 20 feet of build-to. And this goes to the comment Scott made a few minutes ago. The bylaw anticipates that the building will be, the front facade of the building will be either 0 feet from the front lot line as a minimum, or a maximum of 20 feet. So that's your build-to zone between 0 and 20. Well, we've stepped the building back a little bit more. So our minimum is 4 feet in certain areas and 33 feet as a maximum. So our build-to, rather than being 0 to 20, is 4 to 33. Is that a bad thing? No, we simply have to ask for a special permit for it. And that allows us to have the greater pedestrian space, the greater sidewalk areas and gathering spaces. Parking setback of 30 feet is required. We've got a couple of sections where the parking is closer than 30 feet in certain areas to the front lot line. Our minimum is 9.3 feet. Under current conditions, by the way, I suppose I could call it a grandfathered condition, we've got parking that is like right on the lot line. So we're stepping back the parking certainly than existing conditions, but we're asking for a special permit in some areas where vast majority of our parking meets the 30-foot setback. Building height, 4 stories or 45 feet is the bylaw. We can ask for a special permit, and we have, to allow 4 stories and 49 feet. So we're proposing to go up an extra 4 feet. And the reason for that is to provide a slightly higher commercial first floor. And there are sections of the bylaw that specifically suggest commercial first floors should be a little bit higher. So we've incorporated that into the design, but that results in us asking for a very modest special permit allowing us to go to 49 feet. And as you saw before from Joe's presentation, it fits within the immediate buildings that we have. Street-facing wall width is a maximum of 60 feet, and we have a width of 79 feet. Street-facing wall width, offset depth, minimum of 4, maximum of 8. We're proposing a 1-foot width and a 5-foot length. Again, technical design type of special permits that we're asking for here. Street-facing transparency, the ground floor and upper floor minimum and maximum is 60% and 20%. We are proposing 43% on the ground floor and 13% on the upper floors. Building length, street-facing facade, maximum of 150. We are proposing with a single building design, again, broken up in the center by the center corridor of 298 feet. And the last is a building footprint under the bylaw of 10,000 square feet without a special permit, but greater than that with a special permit, and we are seeking the special permit for this building footprint of 38,900 square feet. So those are the special permits.
Questions from the board on the special permits requested?
I can go through the criteria as well if you'd like.
In a moment.
Okay.
At this moment, anyone on the board have a question? No. Hearing none, if you could just do the criteria at the beginning. Yeah. And then we'll do the waivers.
Okay.
So, I mean, ostensibly, what your response is, in large part, is saying you have one building on these two lots. If you broke up the building and, say, put a building on the lot on the right, then you would be able, a lot of this would be, you could reconfigure it several different ways.
Yes, and
you
perhaps
wouldn't have-
result
and
in
you
a
wouldn't-
lesser design.
And you wouldn't have the need for all of these permits.
We wouldn't have the need to request the special permits if the building were designed differently. But the layout would not be meeting the intent of the bylaw as well as this design does. And your bylaw now is very long, very large. We have the bylaw section, we have the zoning regulation section, and we have, through the assistance, and it's been a very significant assistance with planning staff through this process, trying to incorporate all of that. And there are some inconsistencies. So, and there are things that overlap and conflict. And so what we tried to do with this process over the last year and a half, 2 years, is to get to a point where we're meeting the intent and we're meeting the criteria. So let's get into the criteria for the special permit, particularly for the densities. We need to have public realm improvements, and we do have public realm improvements, and they include the improvements to the civic zones, specifically integrating the connection of the rail trail to the redeveloped rail freight house and creation of active open space and commercial uses. The public restrooms adjacent to the rail trail. We have sidewalks and pathways in, through, and around this Maple Square development, providing safe pedestrian passage and activating the public pedestrian uses in the neighborhood. We have streetscape improvements, including street trees, benches, public ways, sitting areas, all along this entire interconnected area. We have public parking spaces are created along Maple Street, public parking spaces created along Hobart Street, improvements in the street layout, as was discussed earlier, particularly with the granite curbing and the improvements, significant improvements along Hobart Street, the elimination of the many existing curb cuts along this frontage area on Maple and Hobart Street, the addition of new sewer line replacement and drainage improvements. Those are public realm improvements that are part of the criteria for the special permit, and we meet those. We wouldn't have had to have all of those things to meet the public realm improvements to justify the special permit, but in fact we do. We're providing quite a number of public realm types of improvements to existing infrastructure, and in fact, in case of the sewer line, for example, or the drainage line, as Scott was mentioning, it is important because you've got municipal utilities that are not adequate. They're old and they're not adequate. And a property owner, such as this property owner, should be able to tie in to adequately, properly constructed municipal services in the public way. We're taking on that responsibility of improving those public utilities. Is that something that the developer should just understand they're required to do? Not necessarily. We should be able to utilize the municipal services. We're improving them. We're improving and correcting existing municipal problems. And that's an important part of the criteria for improvements that we're creating. In addition, special permit criteria also includes that adequate utilities and public services are provided, and we have demonstrated that with the plans as submitted, again, through the work with the town departments. We are having a positive impact on the pedestrian comforts and safety. Again, this is language lifted right from the bylaw. The project will have a positive fiscal impact on tax-based municipal services and employment opportunities. And the special permit will benefit the neighborhood and the downtown area as a whole, allowing the redevelopment of a long derelict area to be attractive, financially viable, provide needed housing, all as criteria for the special permit. And I believe that covers the special, oops, no, do I have more? Nope, I believe we meet all of the requirements for special permits generally under Section 30 of the zoning bylaw, as well as the specific special permit criteria under Section 18 and Section 22 of the zoning bylaw as it relates to this project. So we meet the criteria for these special permits. And again, the special permits aren't a favor that we're asking for. It's built into the bylaw that we can propose these things, but in order to do it, we have to get a special permit. Otherwise, we wouldn't have to ask at all. But that's why we're here for this process, and we have to demonstrate compliance with the criteria. And we have, in fact, through our presentation, through our application, and through what we've just discussed, demonstrated that we do meet the criteria. So those are the special permits.
Questions from the board on the special permits? Anyone? How about the waivers?
The waivers are both in Section 18, we have a couple of waivers, and in Section 22, we have waivers. Now, these have a far lesser degree of criteria for waivers. These are requests that, in order to make the project proceed in accordance with the intent and purpose of the bylaw, and as presented, we've got to ask for some waivers from you, and you have it within your jurisdiction to grant these waivers. First one, bicycle parking. So the bylaw has been drafted in a way that is more detailed, perhaps, than some of the other bylaws, certainly more than bylaws historically in Danvers have been. And when you do that, you often end up in situations like we are here, where you have a provision of the bylaw that when you look at the project, it really just doesn't make sense. And so you have to make waivers, and you have that jurisdiction to do it and to use your backgrounds in reviewing plans to see if those waivers are consistent with the intent of the bylaw. So the first one is bicycle parking. Under the bylaw, we would have to provide 150 indoor bicycle parking spaces. I think when we were meeting with staff initially, or at one of the meetings, we all did the calculations, and we said 150 parking spaces for bicycles indoors. That seems like a lot. So we do have outdoor bicycle parking. We do have indoor bicycle parking. We're proposing 24 indoor parking spaces for bikes. We think that's reasonable based on the experience of the developer doing these types of developments, that 24 bicycle parking spaces are enough. If it turns out that we need more, we'll provide more. But 150 seems like a lot. And so we've asked for a waiver from that. The second is a pedestrian frontage zone.
Did you get that, David? They will agree to the Netherlands exception for bicycle parking. Thank you.
Just trying to set a model precedent.
All right, let's see. The pedestrian frontage zone, residential and non-residential uses not oriented to public access to be allowed on the ground floor requires a waiver. So we have some residential units on the ground floor. And for this waiver, the board needs to determine that the street front residential uses will not have an adverse impact on the continuity and vitality of the pedestrian-oriented street front. Well, we've certainly met that. As you can see with our renderings and with the site plan, the rendering clearly provides continuity of the streetscape, continuity of the pedestrian ways, and there is no negative impact having some residential units on the first floor. And again, under another waiver is a pedestrian in the pedestrian frontage zone, is that those non-resident, or the residential uses on the first floor will be set back 40 feet from the street line. This is where it conflicts a little bit with another section where it was 60 feet from the street line. In either case, it's not having a negative impact. We're set back quite a bit. We've already discussed that a number of times. So that having those residential units along Maple Street on the first floor do not negatively impact the pedestrian aspects of the project, nor do they impact the continuity. Residential transition zone. Okay, the proposed project is a mixed-use type of building, so that we meet that. The project proposes, as we've already talked about, the 36 units per acre and the height of 49 feet. These were also under the transition zone. It's a waiver, but we've already talked about them under the special permit. So this is where we get some conflict and overlapping. Building setback. The proposed, and this was, again, we've talked about it now 3 times. This is the same thing with the setback of the building versus where the build-to zones, and in this case, under this particular section 22.4.E, it's a waiver, not a special permit, but we've talked about it already. Then we have waivers from the zoning regulations. That's a separate book. And these are, they've been requested, we've discussed them with staff, and I don't know that we really can characterize them as waivers, because the language in the zoning regulations uses words like certain things are discouraged. Well, that's not a requirement that we're asking a waiver from. So in the first case, they are, one of the waivers listed is abrupt transition in the building height, going from the 4 stories down to the 3 stories, should be discouraged. Well, I'm not quite certain how you get differing height buildings if you don't go from one level to another. So it's discouraged to have that, that abrupt change. So we've requested a waiver, but I think the architectural integrity of the building stands well and demonstrates a smooth transition. The architectural context and adaptive reuse of historic structures. So we've asked for a waiver if necessary, because we don't have Greek Revival or Georgian or Colonial Revival architecture. I think Joe has gone into great detail about the architectural design and how it fits. It fits with the 20 Locust Street building. It fits with the ambulance building as well as other buildings in town. Sustainable site development standards. To the extent that we need a waiver, we'll ask for it, but we have not incorporated the low-impact development and any lead elements other than what we've already discussed, and we do have some. We do have electric parking stations and things like that, but we just haven't gotten to that level of design. So that's a waiver. Building privacy. This is sustainable building design standards. Ground story dwelling units should be elevated. Again, doesn't say must be, it says should be. So I suppose the elevated grade against any adjacent sidewalk. The ground story residential units are not raised above grade level. The windowsills are not above eye level. So that's true. So to the extent that should be is determined to be mandatory, we'll ask for a waiver from that. Again, the design of the building, the renderings speak for themselves, that this is a cohesive and attractive building. Energy efficiency, we are in fact striving for energy efficiency, and the details of that simply just haven't been developed at this stage. We have some other waivers that staff has recommended be included in the waiver list, and all of them say if necessary. We can go through these. At least 50% of the windows on each floor of the building should be operable. We have made the windows operable on the restaurant. It talks about daylight views. Again, this bylaw gets really particular on certain things that, and detailed. Particular might be the wrong word, but detailed. Daylight views. A minimum of 50% of the floor area of all regularly occupied interior spaces should receive sufficient daylight equal to the spatial daylight autonomy of 300 lux or more for at least 50% of the time. We have a well-designed building, well-designed residential units. They're going to be attractive. They're going to be very appropriately designed, and I suppose if you'd like the architect to speak to that, but I think we actually do meet that requirement. A direct line of sight to the outdoors should be provided for at least 75% of the floor area. I think we meet that requirement. Again, stormwater management issues, inclusion of a green roof has not been considered at this time, and yes, that is true. We are not considering putting a green roof on this building. Lastly, we have some waivers from standard site plan review criteria, and we've provided all of the information. We've put it on different sheets than what would normally be seen under Section 4 of the zoning regulations. We've discussed early on, before we put the site plan set together, we discussed the requirements of different sheets and what should be on those sheets with planning staff, and I believe staff supports the they're not even technical, it's more plan submission type of waivers that are listed here under Section 4. All the information is there. It just may be on different types of sheets. And finally, as I've indicated before, along those same lines, the engineering department comments that you've received, we would take as a condition of approval that all of those will be met in the normal course and proper course of construction. So there we have it. And for each of these waivers, to the extent that we need them, the project has been designed to meet those requirements to the greatest extent practicable for this project, and certainly meeting the intent of the bylaw. So that is, those are the special permits and the waiver requests that we have. Again, and I'll just throw in again that we discussed in the first meeting, we do meet the criteria for affordable housing, which is 20%, 30 new affordable housing units will be provided. So I would be happy to answer any questions on those, but I think I'll wrap up my presentation portions where I started at the first meeting, which is just reiterating the purpose of this mixed-use sub-district. And this is the language from the bylaw. The mixed-use sub-district is intended to encourage a mix of uses, which we do, and a mix of scale and densities, which we do, with predominant density beginning at the intersection of Maple and Hobart Streets, which is exactly what we do with this project. And going from there, we have created a vibrant public realm and high-quality housing production with business opportunities together. So with that, I will end where I began. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before I turn it back to the board, I would just ask staff just to kind of, if you could just maybe just explain your process quickly, knowing that this was the first, applicant for this zone, which was, as was mentioned, was a very complicated bylaw that was passed by the town several years ago that's very intense. Maybe you can just address, whether it's the audience concerns that, the process.
Sure. So after the last application, we met with the development team to see what was going on with the site. We had multiple meetings with them after that just to see where they were at, assess what permitting path they'd like to go down. This is not their only option for this site as it stands. So there are other options out there for this site for redevelopment. Luckily, we were fortunate enough that they chose to go this specified route, which is more in keeping with the bylaw and the overlay than what is otherwise available to them. Following that, we had multiple meetings to flesh this out a little bit better, brought it to individual town departments to get their comments prior to going to a full development review team, or TRC as we call it here. I think we met independently with the electrical division at least 4 times, engineering division at least 3 times. We've met with police, fire, Department of Health, everybody involved. The assessor's department was brought in. The town's chief financial officer was there at most of the meetings. The town manager was there in certain instances. So full court press on trying to get the best look and best building and the most positive outcome for the town through this project and this process. Subsequent to that, I believe the applicants have had multiple neighborhood meetings, both in the prior iteration and then the run up to this meeting as well. Outside of that process, they've met with the Affordable Housing Trust. So there's been multiple courses for input along the way, I think, as well as the Danvers Rail Trail. So there's been a lot of input. It's been a lot of work, a long time. I'd say, they've been working on this for 16 months, pretty much straight out. So culminating in where we're at this evening.
And the staff recommendation is?
Staff recommends this favorably for approval. We think it complies with the vision and the idea, the ideology, and the prospect of the bylaw.
Okay, thank you very much. Members of the board, additional questions to the applicant? Tori?
I don't have any questions. I want to commend the applicant for the process that you've gone through, the amount of input that you've incorporated into this design. And I live around the corner from this, and I like it. I'd like to come out of Oak Street and turn left and see this. This little quaint town has a history of intensive industrial manufacturing. I don't want to bring that back. I don't want to perpetuate the residue of that era. I'd like to see a very livable, pedestrian-friendly, family-friendly downtown. And I think this contributes greatly to the downtown area, extends the downtown area into a section of town that really isn't something that I'd like to see more of in Danvers, referring to the buildings currently on the site.
Thank you, Peg.
I like this also. This is what I believe we envisioned in 2017, this type of building and buildings going into this area where it drew pedestrians. There were apartments, there was affordable apartments. The streetscapes were cleaned up, and I think they did a fantastic job. It's a very, very complicated project. This is the first one. And I'm sure over the years, the planning board will be making modifications and housekeeping and all that to this zoning. But I think they've done a great job, and I'm really very, very pleased to see this.
Lou?
Yeah, I'm very pleased with this as well. It's and I looked at all at the request for special permits and waivers very carefully, and did and particularly with respect to the density as well. And I do believe that the applicant has really met the intent of the bylaw in terms of has provided the public benefit improvements, particularly such as, for example, utilizing the rail shed area and creating a space in that area. I'm also concerned as well, in terms of, growing up on Water Street in a very short distance from what was the Creason Cook Tannery, which was a, 4 or 5 story block building, in a very industrial usage. And so being able to take this area and be able to redevelop in an area that will be able to, bring pedestrians into the downtown area, as well as I think the affordable housing piece of it is very important as well. I think very important for the town. And I'm also I know there were a number of sort of homework assignments after the last meeting in terms of questions and questions that had been raised, even such things as awnings and operable windows in the restaurant spaces. I think which was a point that I raised, and the team addressed that. And I think I'm impressed in terms of the responsiveness to the boards and public comments since the last meeting. So I have nothing further.
Thank you. John?
No, I'm supportive as well, and I think it's important for the public to know, when Peg mentioned back 5 years ago, it even started before that, when one member of the Board of Selectmen at that time asked the planning board to look at the downtown, to plan for the future, to see if there's a way to encourage more residential use, how the top units of some of the commercial space that's vacant could be used for the future, and really to drive economic activity to the town of Danvers for a variety of reasons. And we started out with a group of developers, given the planning board their input of what's going to be necessary to take private capital to invest in the town of Danvers. And it's got to be a win-win for the developer as well as the town. And I think this project found that right mix. And as David has highlighted, it's important to recognize what could be done by right. There wouldn't be a project like this. So, a lot of time and effort has been put into this particular project, and I do think the public is getting a tremendous benefit for what's being proposed. I think the challenge will be the execution. It's going to be a multi-year project, and clearly there'll be some long-term construction frustrations for the abutters, but I think this team has demonstrated that they'll be willing to listen and work with the town, and I think that's an important criteria as well. So with that, I am supportive of this project.
Thank you, Gene.
I also am in favor of this project. I think it's something that our town can be proud of for years to come, and I just want to thank you, the applicant, for your attention to detail and for willingness to work with all of the different members of the town and the boards. So thank you.
Before we turn it over to any voting, I did want to have the audience have a chance to comment or question on the proposed special permit requests and waivers. So if anyone in the audience does have a question at this time, I would entertain that. Mr. Simon.
Jim Simon, Precinct 7, Town Meeting Member. I have talked to nobody that thinks that that's what they expected. I know at the last meeting here, I showed the picture of what we voted on, the hypothetical layout. And all the special permits, like where it says 24 units per building only. And then you can deviate from that with the special permit. So I'm thinking, okay, 27, 30 units, not 24 to 147. Building size, maximum size, 10,000 square feet. Okay, 12,000, 15,000, not 4 times larger than that. But so all that being said, I think we're going to go with this, and I really appreciate the time that developers, Nick and Anthony, spent with us, took care of a lot of the minutia things like that. Very well done. But hopefully for the rest of our neighborhoods that we want to, that part of this overlay or whatever you call it, maybe we can look at those special permits and, rein them in a little bit. Go just a certain percentage more on the units or whatever, so we get a little bit more of that neighborhood feel that we were looking for. And that's all I got. And all in all, I guess I'm okay with this, all right? So thank you very much.
Thank you. Other members in the audience? Mr. Bates.
Thank you. I was remiss earlier. I want to thank the planning board. The 6 of you who sit up there and do this work for nothing as volunteers for this town, I can't thank you enough for the hard work you put in for this town. I don't want to tinker with Attorney McCann, but she says 49 feet. I downloaded my code book before I came here, and it says 40 feet max, not 45. I'm not going to get into that. I trust, again, the staff would have picked up on that if it was a real problem. Her math kind of drives me crazy, too, on the number of units. 4 acres, 36 times 4 is 144, not 147. But I suppose she'd probably tell me it's 4.3 acres, and you guys know that. I trust that you guys will take care of that. I think it's a great project. I'm excited about it. And again, thank you for your service to the town.
Thank you. Final questions, comments from the audience? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing at this time.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. At this time, the first item that we would vote on would be the grant of a special permit. I would ask the clerk to read the motion on that.
Okay. Grant of special permits for 114, 128, 140, 146, 146A, and 148 Maple Street, 1, 3, 6, 7, and 9 Hobart Street, 53, 61, and 66 North Putnam Street, 2 and 6 Putnam Court, known as Maple Square. Date of application, April 13th, 2022. Date of hearing, May 24th, 2022. June 14th, 2022. Date of decision, June 14th, 2022. The Danvers Planning Board voted to approve special permits found in sections 18.4.B.2, 18.4.c, 18.5.d.4, 18.5.d.6.d, and 18.13 of the zoning bylaw for properties located at 114 Maple Street, map 43, lot 510, 128 Maple Street, map 43, lot 512, 140 Maple Street, map 43, lot 530, 146 Maple Street, map 43, lot 531, 146A Maple Street, map 43, lot 532, 148 Maple Street, map 43, lot 533, 1 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 509, 3 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 508, 6 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 405, 7 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 507, 9 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 506, 53 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 518, 61 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 516, 66 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 529, 2 Putnam Court, map 43, lot 515, and 6 Putnam Court, map 43, lot 514, requested by AAM 15 Management LLC. The special permits are associated with a mixed-use development shown on the following plans. Site plan and architectural drawings entitled Site Plan Redevelopment Plans, Maple Square, 114, 128, 140, 146, 146A, and 148 Maple Street, 1, 3, 6, 7, and 9 Hobart Street, 53, 61, and 66 North Putnam Street, and 2 and 6 Putnam Court, Assessors Map 43, lots 405, 506 through 510, 512, 514 through 5616, 518, and 529 to 533, Danvers, Massachusetts, prepared by the Moran Cameron Group, Halverson Ty Bond Studio, and Joseph Tatone and Associates, dated April 12, 2022, revised June 6, 2022, and June 10, 2022. Supporting materials include traffic report entitled Maple Street Mixed-Use Development, Danvers, Massachusetts, prepared by TEC Inc., dated April 12, 2022. Special permits. 1. Section 18.4.B.2, maximum number of dwelling units per building. The planning board finds that pursuant to section 18.4.B.2 of the zoning bylaw, maximum number of dwelling units per building, the following criteria have been satisfied for exceeding the maximum number of dwelling units per building. A, the municipal water and sewer systems will not become overloaded by the proposed use. B, the public streets will not become overloaded by the proposed use. C, the value of other land and buildings will not be depreciated by the proposed use. D, the specific site is an appropriate location for the use or structures. E, the use developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. F, there will not be an undue nuisance or serious hazard to vehicles or pedestrians. G, the proposed use or structures will be in harmony with the general purpose of the bylaw. 2. Section 18.4.C, density bonus requirements. The planning board finds that pursuant to section 18.4.C of the zoning bylaw, density bonus requirements, the following public benefit improvements provided are sufficient to allow the requested density of 36 units per acre. The public benefits provided related to transportation satisfy the parking and transportation demand management requirements associated with this development. A, new landscape sidewalks along Maple Street and Hobart Street frontages. B, streetscape improvements such as street trees and furnishings on public streets as well as sitting areas. C, public parking spaces and publicly accessible parking spaces along Maple Street and Hobart Street. D, reuse of the Freight House and the associated publicly oriented private space, POPs, terrace seating space, new handicap ramp and landscaping at the Freight House, including a lawn area surrounded by benches for public gathering space. Additionally, a new historic information monument about the Freight House will be installed. E, improvements to designated civic zones, Danvers Rail Trail, for the purposes of enhancing publicly controlled active or passive recreation in desirable locations within character-based zoning district. CBZDs, providing an integrated connection between the Danvers Rail Trail and the repurposed Freight House. New public restrooms at the Freight House adjacent to the Danvers Rail Trail, as well as new bike racks and bike repair station. F, new granite curbing associated with the modified roadway edge. G, elimination of numerous existing curb cuts along Maple Street and Hobart Street to be closed. H, new streetlights along Maple Street and Hobart Street. I, environmental remediation. J, adjusting the signal time of the existing traffic signal at the Maple Street and Hobart Street intersection. K, providing electrical conduit from the existing traffic signal to the bike crossing of the rail trail at Maple Street. 3, Section 18.5.D.4, Parking Requirements Table. The Planning Board, pursuant to Section 18.5.D.4 of the zoning bylaw, Parking Requirements Table, has considered the supply and demand of public and private parking in the district, mobility management programs and services, and that the parking provided in excess of the minimum requirement does not result in underutilized spaces or excessive impervious surfaces when granting the special permit for exceeding the maximum number of parking spaces. 4, Section 18.5.D.6D, Street side parking. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to Section 18.5.D.6D of the zoning bylaw, street side parking, to allow the use of street side parking, the following criteria have been considered. A, the supply and demand of public and private parking in the district. B, mobility management programs and services. C, that parking provided in excess of the minimum requirement does not result in underutilized spaces, excessive impervious surfaces. 5, Section 18.13, Design Special Permits. The Planning Board finds that pursuant to Section 18.13 of the zoning bylaw, Design Special Permits, the following criteria have been satisfied for varying from specified requirements associated with the development site and building design set forth in Section 18. A, consistent with the purpose of Section 18 in general. B, consistent with any special permit eligibility requirements as indicated elsewhere in this Section 18. C, social, economic, or community needs are served by the proposal, such as expanding housing choices. D, adequate safety of traffic flow, access, parking, and loading are provided. E, adequate utilities and other public services are provided. F, positive impacts on pedestrian comfort and safety. G, potential fiscal impact, including impact on municipal services, tax base, and employment, are positive. And H, such relief shall not result in substantial detriment to the CBZDs or surrounding neighborhoods. The variations in design from the design specifications stated in Section 18 are as follows. Section 18.5.A.4b, access and utilities, pedestrian passage. Street alley required no less than 50 feet from intersecting street, and pedestrian passage required every 200 feet along a block. These design features are not proposed along Maple Street or Hobart Street. Section 18.5.D.10c, parking access and screening, curb cut. In the CBZDs, only one curb cut shall be allowed on a building lot. Where more than one curb cut exists, it may not remain unless approved by the board. Additional curb cuts are proposed on Hobart Street and North Putnam Street. C, Section 18.6.D.1b, facade composition for commercial and mixed-use buildings. No building shall be wider than 100 feet. The proposed mixed-use building is wider than 100 feet. The building is 252 feet along Maple Street, 270 feet along Hobart Street, and 135 feet along North Putnam Street. D, Section 18.5.A.1, development site area. The development site area is not contiguous and is separated by rights-of-way. E, Section 18.7.7, mixed-use building. Small room and 1. The built-to-zone is proposed to be set back 33 feet on the corner of Maple and Hobart Streets, where a maximum of 20 feet is allowed. Small room and 2. Parking is required to be set back a minimum of 30 feet. The parking setback varies throughout the site to less than 30 feet in some locations shown on the plan. Small Roman 3, building height is limited to 4 stories and 45 feet. The proposal is for 4 stories and 49 feet in height due to the need for 18-foot ceilings for the commercial space. Small Roman 4, street-facing wall width without offset is limited to a maximum of 60 feet, where 79 feet is proposed. Small Roman 5, street-facing wall offset depth and length is required to be a minimum of 4 feet in depth for a length of 8 feet, where 1 foot of depth for 5 feet in length is provided on Maple Street. Small Roman 6, street-facing transparency is required to be a minimum of 60% on the ground floor and 20% on any upper floors, where 43% is proposed for the ground floor and 13% for the upper floors. Small Roman 7, A street-facing facade is limited to a maximum of 150 feet where 298 feet is proposed. Small Roman 8, maximum building footprint is limited to 10,000 square feet where 38,900 square feet is proposed. Waivers. Waivers from Section 18, bicycle parking. Section 18.5.D8, bicycle parking. The project requires 150 indoor covered bicycle parking spaces. 24 bicycle spaces are proposed. Pedestrian frontage zone, PFZ. Section 18.8.D.2C, residential and other non-residential uses not oriented to public access shall be allowed on ground floors. The planning board determines that street front residential and other non-public uses will not have an adverse impact on the continuity and vitality of the pedestrian-oriented street front uses. Waivers from Section 22. Section 22.11, waiver of requirements. Pedestrian frontage zones. Section 22.3.D.3.C, residential and other non-residential uses shall be allowed on ground floors on mixed-use sites or in mixed-use buildings. The planning board determines that street front residential uses will not have an adverse impact on the continuity and vitality of the commercial street front uses. Residential transitional frontage zones, permitted building types. Section 22.3.E.3, permitted building types. Mixed-use building is not an allowed typology in a pedestrian frontage zone. The project is a mixed-use building type. Residential transitional frontage zones, maximums density and height. Section 22.3.E.4, maximum density and height. The maximum density for building types permitted on parcels fronting on a residential transitional frontage zone street segment is 12 dwelling units per acre, and the maximum building height is 3 stories and 35 feet. The project is 36 dwelling units per acre, and a maximum height is 4 stories and 49 feet. Building setback. Section 22.4.E, building setback and street enclosure. The height of the building is 49 feet along Maple Street and Hobart Street with no step back, does not meet the 40-foot maximum height of the building with step backs as shown in the figures in Section 22.4.E. The proposed height of the building at 39 feet along North Putnam Street with no step back does not meet the 35-foot maximum height of the building with step backs as shown in the figures in Section 22.4.E. Conditions of approval. Prior to the issuance of the building permit, this special permit decision shall be recorded at the Southern Essex District Registry of Deeds. 2, pursuant to Section 22.8, fair housing and affordability requirements of the Danvers zoning bylaw, the applicant and/or property owner shall provide 30 affordable housing units, which shall be added to the state's subsidized housing inventory, SHI. The applicant and/or property owner shall hire a monitoring agent and provide a marketing plan to the town of Danvers prior to the issuance of a building permit. 3, the applicant agrees to complete the construction phase comments from the Danvers Engineering Division memo dated May 19th, 2022. Prior to the issuance of a building permit, provide electrical conduit from the existing traffic signal to the crossing of the rail trail at Maple Street. Within 18 months of the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, adjust the signal time of the existing traffic signal at the Maple Street and Hobart Street intersection to maximize efficiency. Any approval of the special permits shall lapse within 3 years from the grant thereof if construction has not begun by such date, except for good cause. James Sears, Chair.
Motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by John. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. All right, the next item is the site plan approval. A motion for site plan approval.
Very good. Okay. Moment to get a drink of water.
A well-deserved drink.
Yeah.
It's gonna be longer than the bylaw.
Okay, here we go. This is where we'll include the 2 conditions, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, site plan review for
Like I can't save to the.
114, 128, 140, 146, 146A, and 148 Maple Street, 1, 3, 6, 7, and 9 Hobart Street, 53, 61, and 66 North Putnam Street, 2 and 6 Putnam Court known as Maple Square. Date of application, April 13th, 2022. Date of hearing, May 24th, 2022. June 14th, 2022. Date of decision, June 14th, 2022. The Danvers Planning Board finds the site plan submitted by AAM 15 Management LLC for properties at 114 Maple Street, map 43, lot 510, 128 Maple Street, map 43, lot 512, 140 Maple Street, map 43, lot 530, 146 Maple Street, map 43, lot 531, 146A Maple Street, map 43, lot 532, 148 Maple Street, map 43, lot 533, 1 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 509, 3 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 508, 6 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 405, 7 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 507, 9 Hobart Street, map 43, lot 506, 53 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 518, 61 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 516, 66 North Putnam Street, map 43, lot 529, 2 Putnam Court, map 43, lot 515, and 6 Putnam Court, map 43, lot 514, 467 Maple Street, Assessors Map 18, lot 32, to be in substantial compliance with the criteria and regulations adopted by the town. Details of the plan review can be found on the following plan. Site redevelopment plans, Maple Square, 114, 128, 140, 146, 146A, and 148 Maple Street, 1, 3, 6, 7, and 9 Hobart Street, 53, 61, and 66 North Putnam Street, and 2 and 6 Putnam Court, Assessors Map 43, lots 405, 506 to 510, 512, 514 to 5616, 518, and 529 to 533. Danvers, Massachusetts, prepared by the Moran Cameron Group, Inc., Halverson Ty Bond Studio, and Joseph Tatone and Associates, dated April 12, 2022, revised June 6, 2022, and June 10, 2022. The following submission requirements have been waived. Section 4.3.1D, title sheet. Existing contours at 10-foot intervals. Existing contours are shown on the site analysis plan, sheet C3. Section 4.3.4, site construction plan. Section 4.3.4E, the location and characteristics of any proposed common open space. The location and characteristics of common open space is shown on site layout plan, sheet C6, and landscape plan, sheet L1.1. Section 4.3.4I, a table indicating amounts of earth material that are to be removed, added, or reused on site in cubic foot, not shown on the plan. Section 4.3.6B, utilities plan. The proposed location, profile, and size of utilities to be constructed on the site and the proposed connections to the town's utilities, including proposed locations of service connections. The profile of utilities is not shown on the plan. Section 4.3.7, landscape plan. Section 4.3.7A, existing and proposed grades. Existing and proposed grades shown on the site analysis plan, sheet C3, and site construction plan, sheet C5. Section 4.3.7J, a table showing the percentage of existing and proposed impervious surface and percentage of landscaping. A table with impervious surface percentage is not shown. Section 4.3.8, off-street parking and loading plan. No off-street parking and loading plan submitted. Information required on the off-street parking plan is shown on the site layout plan, sheet C6. Section 4.3.8B, the construction details and the location, size, and type of materials for surface paving, drainage facilities, curbing or wheel stops, trees, screening, and lighting. The construction details for these items are not shown on the plan. Section 4.3.8C, the location of all buildings, lot lines, and zoning boundary lines from which the parking lot or loading area must be set back. The parking setback is shown on dimensional regulations plan, sheet C4. Section 4.3.8D, where landscaping is to be provided, the type and size of plant material. The location, size, and type of landscaping is shown on the landscaping plan, sheet L1.1.
Want to do the conditions now?
Yep. And we have it's also subject to the additional conditions. First condition, the applicant will satisfy each of the engineering comments in its entirety. Second condition, the applicant will return to the planning board with the signed proposal for the project. Zoning regulations of the planning board. The planning board finds the project to be in substantial compliance with Section 7, character-based zoning districts design standards of the zoning regulations of the planning board. The subject is, this project is subject to the attached list of general conditions. This site plan shall lapse within 3 years from the review thereof, if construction has not begun by such date, except for good cause. James Sears, Chair.
Thank you, Lou. The motion's been made. Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll give that to Peg. Peg for the second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you and good luck. Thank you to the staff also. Do we have any, we don't have any minutes or anything, so I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Nice job, Mr. Chair.
Good job, Lou.
No problem.
Can you get some gargle now?
I have a court hearing tomorrow. We'll see if I have any voice left.
Leave it to the lawyer.